Well, get ready to hear a Jesuit talk about poverty. Fasten your seatbelts. But there's that sense of, all the jokes. This is, as they come into our homes, if this is poverty, let's talk about those other vows. What do they look like? And and I remember growing up as a little baby Jesuit, and we were talking about, what does it mean to, what does Jesuit poverty mean? We who have master's degrees and doctorates, we who have health care, and there's always a safety net for each of us. So what does poverty mean? And we always talk about, we should be living as a family of slender means. But of course we turned it into, we should be living as a slender family of means. A slender family, I'm working on it. A slender family of means. And so I kind of, but today we're challenged, what do we need? If we can't take it with us, what actually do we need? And there's two kind of images that are kind of in my heart today. One is of this Kennedy grandchild. I think it's Cerise. I'm not sure how to pronounce her name, but Cerise Kennedy Hill, who just died from an opioid overdose. And, she was, through her years of college, would talk about what seemed to be mental illness and struggles of health and heart and how difficult that was. And so I'm just reminded that no matter how much money or finances we have, we're never really protected from a lot of that difficulty of life, of whether it be mental health, whether it be addiction. And we've seen it so much in our communities that none of us can really be spared of that. And no matter how much money we have, and then what we just have is each other. We just have each other. The other image I have is I'm heading to Connecticut to spend a little time with my mother as we go to her elder care lawyer, as we talk about finances at home. And my father's 92 with dementia. My mother's taking care of them, but it's getting harder and harder. And what happens if it's unsafe for my father to stay at home? A year in a nursing home in Fairfield, Connecticut is $200,000 a year. And you may be experiencing this now anyway. But I mean, how much grain do you need to store up? And how many barns do you need to have? Let's say he's there for $5, that's $1 million. And it's just, my family has means. What do people do that don't have means? Who don't have that safety net? And how do we make it? How are we somehow living this life of heart, but we're also in the body, and the body needs to be protected and fed and clothed and housed. I learned something years ago about simplicity, and I used to take students from I was at a number of different colleges, at the University of San Francisco, I was at College of Holy Cross, and at Loyola. But I take them to Guatemala, to El Salvador, and to other really developing nations. And so they get a sense of what it's like to really be materially poor, what it's like to not have all the things that they've really grown up with. The things that they took for granted, cell phones and iPads and all of this stuff. And I remember we were in Belize one time, a little town called Dangriga, very simple, not a whole lot of money. But it was, we were working at a school, and a woman came up and she asked me, she said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I brought a group of students and we're teaching in this school." And she said, "Well, what are you trying to do?" And I said, "Well, we're trying to create a relationship with the school so we can share knowledge and share ways of teaching." And she said, "If you've come here because you think our children are poor and need to be saved, don't." She said, "I know poverty. I just taught for 20 years in the Seattle school system. I know poverty. And it's not about money. It's about care. It's about love. It's about how many resources were really taken from students so they could be put elsewhere. She saw families struggling and kind of like working against one another so their own student could rise up rather than have everybody rise up into the school. She saw poverty. She saw lack of care. She saw heartlessness. And she said, here, I want you to look at this town, Dangriga, Belize. There's love here. Young kids who may not look like they've had breakfast, but they've had a family that kissed them as they go out the door to school and wait for their return with love. So I think about that today, and I think about that reflection that I had with students after that experience. They often come back and they say, well, my life has been changed. I say, what has changed? She said, well, one student said, I really have a sense that often we in the United States are materially rich, but spiritually poor. And I've gone to this little town in Belize called Dangriga, and I found people who are materially poor, but spiritually rich. And I would rather live like that. I would rather live a life that's spiritually rich. Life gets complicated these days. There's so many things to deal with. But let us consider our own journey. How have we continued to feed our hearts with love and companionship? How have we fed our hearts with prayer and worship and song and just sharing and being here in one place? Hopefully we will continue to be on that journey of becoming spiritually rich with one another, with our family and friends, and with God.